right. I think we are live, Sabrena. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good to see everybody. Folks are jumping on here. We're so grateful to be here with you this morning. Those that are jumping on, we'll let some folks jump on. We're going to be doing an online, straight from the Advanced Leadership Training Guide. Some of you don't have that, but we're bringing you these trainings, kind of piggybacking off of last week. So we'll talk about that and the reason, the why behind that here in a second. But I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol and food issues, and my name is Rodney.
Hey, Rodney.
Hey.
And my name is Sabrena. I'm a grateful believer. I struggle with codependency and food issues.
Hey, Sabrena. So last week, Sabrena, Megan was with us last week, and we had a fun time kind of introducing online step study groups, right? First time in our 29-year history.
Yes.
So it's a pretty big deal. So we wanted to give you some coaching on that. So if you missed that last week, last Saturday, same time, go back and watch that video because it'll be geared more toward the specific online stuff to be thinking about. But with that, I want to just mention a couple things, just to reiterate a couple big things, and that is just the safety aspect. Make sure those online groups are gender specific. Make sure you have the headphones on. Make sure you're in a place where there's not other people walking around behind you, kind of a thing, and that you're on camera at all times. So that's just an important. There's lots of good stuff that you want to go back and watch from last week. But that's a pretty big deal just with our safety, and we want people to remain safe in these. So we decided to do that online training, and then we got to thinking we need to probably back up just a little bit and just give you just the basic how to lead a step study group in person and or online. And so that's what we're doing here today. Sabrena, any additional thoughts on that? What we're doing before we jump in here?
Yeah. So there's some of you out there that do not have access to an advanced leader training guide. You've never purchased one for your Celebrate Recovery. Maybe you're one of those ministries we're hearing about where you're starting a CR in the midst of all of this.
Which is awesome.
Yes, you haven't even launched it. And so the fact that we have opened up the ability to have online step study groups as well as the online open share groups, we wanted to make sure that you were well equipped and that you were able to lead a step study, do it well and do it safely. So like Rodney had said, there's also other materials out there. So if you go to the Facebook page, you'll have the video from last week. But also if you go to celebraterecovery.com under CR or CR crisis response, you'll find materials on how, safety issues to go over. And we talk about that in the video from last week a good bit. So, but that's CR crisis response, which is also, you'll find documents for what we're doing today.
Yeah. So I saw a quick question. Is this for leaders? And what we're covering today is for leaders. But even in my local ministry, I've encouraged some people that are kind of getting close to the end of their first step study group and kind of toying around with leadership. And so we welcome people to watch this. If you've got some people in your local ministry that are getting close, you can point them to this video and help them be set up to lead a step study group. So yeah, I think Mary's going to post a link to the website to get the documents for this time here today over the next little bit. And I think the fill-ins are already in there, so you can kind of just walk through this with us. But yeah, we just want to walk you through the basics of a step study group, and we're just going to kind of put our own skin on this this morning. And what does that look like? Sabrena was a ministry leader. You want to tell them a little bit what you do on a local level, just so we kind of...
Sure. I started out as our training coach for back in 2008, 2009-ish. And I did that for 4 or 5 years. Along with my husband, we were the training coaches for our local CR. I eventually became the ministry leader there. And once I got started on being involved on the national level, I stepped back from ministry leading, let someone else take that. And I have actually stepped back into the training coach role since then. And so since I've been a regional director, from that point on, I've been the training coach again at our local
That's
CR.
awesome. Yeah. So I love that you're in this conversation. Sabrena has a wealth of experience and knowledge. As we said last week, well, let me say kind of
What do
quick.
you do on the
Yeah.
local
Yeah.
level?
So I'm a ministry leader, kind of shepherd two campuses, but ministry leader for one. And I'm in my 15th ministry year doing this. And
Mm.
I think that the thing that I bring to the table is a lot of experience from my mistakes.
Same here.
Yeah. I made a ton of mistakes, and so hopefully some of the things that we'll share today, you'll go, okay, that's good. I can learn from that and grow through that. And so we'll try to be vulnerable about some things, even as we walk through this, that we've learned with you to kind of help you with that. Mary just told me she did pin the link in the comments there. If you need to know where to get the handout, you can go there and check that out. But
Carrie, just wanted to say real quick, Carrie Roberts said, we're launching a new group at Ignite in Woodward, Oklahoma. Grateful for the training. So they're one of those groups that are
nice.
launching a CR in the middle of this. So
I
glad
love
we could
that.
do this for you.
I love that. Well, so kind of before we jump into the training, as Sabrena and I were talking, we thought, you know what? There may be somebody watching because you guys are all so awesome. I see lots of familiar names popping up here. You guys are so awesome about sharing these videos. There may be a pastor, there may be an attendee in another church across the country that goes, step study. What is that?
What is
And
that?
why would I be a part of that? So we kind of touched on this last week a little bit, but quick overview, and then we'll talk about the why to do it. But what is a step study? And just kind of give us a brief overview of that again, Sabrena.
So a step study is where, so for Celebrate Recovery in general, we have a large group or general meeting night where we do a lesson or a testimony, music. We do open share time, which is just what it sounds like. It's just open share. We're sharing openly, but we're not sharing anything specific. On another night of the week, we'll do step studies, and this is where we go even deeper into our recovery process. So we start actually, quote unquote, working the steps by going through participant guides where we do homework during the week and we answer questions that we end up sharing specifically on those questions when we come back to group each week. And so we're essentially, like I said, working the steps and going deeper into our healing process.
And where can they get the material itself if they want to pick that up?
Most of you or many of you may know it as pastors.com, but there is a brand new celebraterecoverystore.com.
Awesome?
Yes, it's beautiful. And so celebraterecoverystore.com is where you can go and find the materials. There's also the ability to get them electronically on Kindle through like Amazon. I actually have the Kindle versions, but I also have the physical versions as well. So that's where you can get any and all resources that you're looking for Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah, celebraterecoverystore.com, brand new. So you want to check that out, and it'll keep you from having to try to find us on the pastors.com. So great stuff out there. We're excited about that. So kind of the general tools when you're starting a Celebrate Recovery, and just speaking from a local ministry, obviously you can lead a step study group, and if people just have the 4 participants, they could go through a step study group. But I want to recommend, just from personal experience, the Celebrate Recovery Bible, and at least book 1 when you're starting out. And I always tell people, hey, if you don't want to buy all 4 books, because there is 4 workbooks, maybe you buy book 1, and as you get close to finishing that, buy book 2. But sometimes you can buy them in a pack, and it might be cheaper just to get them all at once. But just giving people permission to do that. But Celebrate Recovery Bible and book 1, and then just an added one if you really want to have tools in people's hands, especially those people that are kind of raw and brand new. That 365-day devotional, we use those a lot as our devotional time, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But not mandatory to have that. It's just, I think it's a good tool to get into people's hands. But why?
Yeah, and just a little note on the participants guides that it is the Journey Begins participants guides, because there's now a Journey Begins step study, which is kind of where you start in step studies, and then there's a Journey Continues for people who want to do a more advanced level who've been through step studies before.
Yeah. Someone mentioned in prison they had one book, and that was a special thing they do for inside prisons. Outside prison walls, we have 4 books, and so yeah, we don't use the inside material for that, and it's a much lower cost for them inside, and so we don't want to abuse that. So we use the 4 workbooks for outside. Thank you for asking that question.
Yes, good question.
And to that point, many of you are going to have some questions. We're going to try to get to some questions on the back end. If we see something pop up like we've done already, we may jump in and answer that real quick. But we'll try to get to some questions. And Mary Owen, our national training director, is actually watching for some questions and texting us so we can keep track of those if we do miss it and as it kind of scrolls by. So, but Sabrena, why in the world would maybe twofold? Why would I do a step study group, and why would I ever want to lead a step study group? I mean, if I've been through it, why would I want to jump right back into that, right? That doesn't sound like a good time, right?
Well, and I'm going to actually start with that one. So I'll start with the second question first.
Yeah.
So why would I want to lead one if I've been through one before? Because I'm speaking to you as someone who's a potential leader. Number one, the biggest reason for leading one is because I still need it. So I still need recovery, even though I've been through a step study one time. Those of us that have done it know that sometimes the perception is, I'm going to do this, I'm going to have my year, I'm going to do my step study, and then I'm going to be done with recovery. I'm going to be recovered. It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
It's a process. It's the process of sanctification, I always say,
Yeah.
just in a very focused way. But so number one, because I need recovery. Number two, because it's part of my 12th step to help others find the same freedom that I've found. And so this is part of my 12-step work to actually lead step study groups or lead open share groups or become involved in leadership or serving. Giving others what I've been given is a huge part of giving to them, but also continuing to work my recovery. I can't continue in my recovery without my step 12.
Yeah.
And I won't continue growing in my recovery.
And you can't, it's something we say in book 4, you can't keep it unless you give it away, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So, yeah, and
Absolutely.
I think that's such a good reminder. People coming into this ministry, which is the human race, I think everybody should come into this ministry. Personal thought there. But everyone has experienced events in their life that have created this hurt, anger, anxiety, even depression and fear and rejection, abandonment. All those kind of things come up for us. And we can begin to develop these core beliefs about ourselves, the way we see God, ourselves, and others. And when somebody has a distorted view of themselves, God, and others, we find ourselves slipping into some defenses, some protections. And in Celebrate Recovery, we call it through the lens of habits. And some of those things can be the big ones that we know about: drugs, alcohol, pornography, sex, all those kind of things. But there's things like people pleasing and low self-esteem and perfectionism and control and withdrawing and conflict. All these things can kind of be the way we protect ourselves, a direct result of running from the hurt. And when we run from the hurt and we develop these unhealthy defenses and protections and habits, it affects the people closest to us, right?
Absolutely.
And so what we're doing, and that's what I love about the Step Study Group, The Journey Begins, is we're, for the first time, pointing people to the hurt so that we can experience healing in that. There's healing in the revealing, right? And we begin to develop a new lens of how we see ourselves, God, and others, this new healthy truth. And as a result, we begin to see those habits that have destroyed us go away, and even better, something new healthy practices come in, right? And we're fruit of that. I like to say we're satisfied customers.
Absolutely.
We're not just participants. Leaders. We're actually satisfied customers in this. We love this process. And so if you are in maybe you're a newcomer stumbling onto this, what's this training for leaders? I just want to encourage you that step study groups could be the biggest life-altering decision that you'll ever make.
Absolutely.
We answer these questions, and the Holy Spirit works in that, and we begin to experience that healing that we desire, right? Because otherwise, we just kind of stay in this place of misery, and we're just apart
Yeah.
from God, and we stay in this place of misery. So we want to kind of reconnect with our native land, so to speak, right, with the Father, and hang out with Him, and begin that healing process. So,
Yeah, I will often say, because people will say, well, what about what Paul says in the Bible that we leave the past behind? And that'll be an argument against doing recovery. But what I will say in my teachings and tell people is that I was that person who thought that I left it behind. Like
yeah,
I looked like I was making great decisions on the outside. But I had all this struggle and pain and hurt within my marriage and myself. And so the thing, and I thought I forgave everybody, and I was good. I wasn't this kind of person to hold a grudge or be in bitterness or unforgiveness,
mm,
but the past had not left me behind,
yes,
because it had a hold on me. And the way that I communicated, the way that I dealt with people, the way that I lived my life day to day, the way I isolated or didn't get vulnerable, there's so many things in the person I became
mm,
that was not healthy, that I didn't even know wasn't healthy. And so I thought I had left it in the past. But if I don't look at it and realize I actually didn't, then I actually won't leave it in the past. So
yeah,
this has given me the ability to truly leave it in the past.
yeah. And I say that too. That our attempts to avoid the past keeps us stuck in the past. So
Yes.
we have to acknowledge we don't want to stay there. Who wants to stay there, right? So we don't dwell on the past, but we got to learn from it and learn how it's
Learn
damaged
from
and
it.
affected us, and how it's affecting the people around us, so that we can experience that healing. So with that, we want to kind of jump in here and kind of, if you're a leader or potential leader, maybe you're getting close, we want to kind of jump into this process, and this is to kind of help us kind of understand what it looks like for a step study. So we're going to put some best practices into this conversation, just what we've learned. Even as Sabrena and I talked, it's like we learn things from each other and go, oh, I never thought of that. I'm going to try that. And so
Yes.
even 15 plus years, it's like, oh, I'm still learning. And so every time I teach this, so I learn something new just by talking to you
Same
guys.
here.
So I'm excited to learn something today with you guys. So just so you know, we want somebody leading a step study group that has been through a step study group. Obviously, we need a leader and a co-leader, and there's many reasons for that. Things can go wrong. Somebody gets sick, and we want the group to keep going. If one of your leaders or co-leaders gets sick, we want that group to keep going. Or something can happen in the group where somebody has to be pulled out just to give them extra attention. Maybe they're dealing with some suicidal ideation, or just maybe they're angry about something because we had to kind of correct them on a guideline or whatever. Hey, let's step out in the
Hmm.
hall and we'll talk about it. And if my co-leader was in here with me, I'd just say, hey, will you take the group? We're going to step out in the hall, right? So make sure you have a leader and a co-leader before you start. That being said, I mean, just some of those people that say, hey, we're getting ready to start, don't let that scare you. It's like, well, we haven't been through it, so we can't lead it. It may be you get the people who are all in. We want to be a part of this, that core leader base, and you guys just work through it together. So you guys are kind of all facilitating it, kind of assign a couple people to be the point people, knowing they haven't been through it, but you get through that first core group together as leaders, so that when you open your doors, all of your leaders have been through a step study group. Anything you'd add to that, Sabrena?
Yeah, definitely. So, like Rodney said, we have to start somewhere with a new ministry
Mm-hmm.
always. Or you may be in a position where I know we've had some shifting of leadership since COVID started and these restrictions. We've lost a few of our leaders, and so maybe you don't have enough leaders to do this. You always have to start somewhere, or maybe you have to reboot. So you have to start with your most committed people, kind of being that leadership point, like he said, and just doing it. So you don't go, well, we don't have someone who's been through a step study,
Yeah.
so I guess we don't do it, and we just wait, because they're not going to fall from the sky being being completed. This is if you have a ministry that has been going and people who have been through step studies that can lead them. So
Yeah.
um, And then, of course, stepping into the hallway will look different on a virtual meeting.
Yes,
At that
yes.
point, we're talking about, hey, let's log off here, and I'm going to give you a call one-on-one, and let the co-leader go ahead and
Yeah,
continue.
yeah, great point. Yeah. So it looks, yeah, obviously it looks different in person. And so some of this training we're gearing toward an in person because we're praying to God one day we'll be meeting in person soon, right?
Yes.
But yeah, we do have to think through that lens if we're online. So with the two would kind of pop offline, the group would keep going with the co-leader. But a couple things. I mentioned the gender specific. They absolutely have to be gender specific. And step
Hmm.
study groups are a little bit different than the open share groups. And I know some of you may be brand new going, what's an open share group? But those are what we typically have during our general meeting night. And right now we call those CR online open share groups. And that's where we just kind of come together. And right now we have mixed issues even in our open share groups because we just don't have the manpower to be issue specific. But typically you'll have some issue specific groups on your general meeting night, like substance abuse or love
Hmm.
and relationship addiction or codependency. So if that's my main issue, we know that we all have multiple issues, but there's one that's kind of causing the most havoc. And so on our general meeting night, people will go to that general or that issue specific open share group. Step studies are going to be all mixed issues. We don't do a step study group just for substance abuse or pornography or whatever. We mix those issues, and there's incredible value to that because I've
Yes.
seen where you have a codependent, and you've probably seen the same thing. You have a codependent in the group of guys, and you have a guy dealing with alcohol in the group of guys, and then they start seeing the perspective from the other side. And what that does is
Hmm.
it gives me clarity and a greater understanding, this new information, and actually helps me to empathize with those that maybe I've hurt because of my codependency or because of my
Yes.
substance abuse, right?
Yes.
So yeah, we have mixed issue, gender specific groups for our step study groups. So a little bit different from our open share that's on our general meeting night. So, but it's
Yes.
typically about a 2 hour meeting. Does it have to be a 2 hour meeting? No, but you need to kind of plan for that's. I wouldn't go longer than 2 hours, number one,
No.
but to kind of plan for that. Um, because there's a lot of stuff, and we're going to get into that. But kind of plan for max 2 hours. I've seen them go an hour and a half. You know, there's a lot to cover, and you don't want to be meeting as a step study group for 2 years because you're only meeting for 45 minutes every week, right? But we do meet once a week on these, right? And we unpack these questions. We write out our questions in the books and then come in and we share those. So plan for about a 2 hour block, knowing there's kind of some flexibility. It may be less than that. Are yours typically around 2 hours as well, Sabrina?
Yes. Well, we go an hour and a half to 2 hours depending on the night of the week because a lot of our step study groups meet on Wednesday nights when we have our regular small group programming for our church. And so there's childcare available. There's, our teen program is going on. And so because that's available, a lot of our step studies will happen on Wednesday night. For those, we do hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes. We
Yeah.
try to, use some time for just fellowshipping kind of near the end. And if someone has children, they got to get out of there, but others will stay in fellowship. So the least amount of time we usually do is an hour and a half.
Great, great. All right, well, let's jump in then. So, following your handout from the website, hopefully you've seen that link that Mary posted there and pinned to the top of the feed there. Um, Understanding the leader's roles and objectives is so important
Mm-hmm.
because we need to know what we're going to do before we go in. One of the big things that's a big component of recovery is having structure. People come in with a lot of chaos happening in their life. And if they come in and as you sit down, you're trying to figure out who's going to do what. Are you going to read this? Are you going to do the devote?
Yeah.
You're just sitting there going, "You guys, were you planning on me being here this morning
Right.
or this evening?" Yeah, so it's just we need to talk about that and understand what our roles and our responsibilities are. So talk that
Yeah.
out before you get there, so that you're kind of on the same page. But I really want to just in that the leader's roles. One of the greatest roles that you have as a step study leader is to be present. And
Mm.
we're going to walk through some nuts and bolts, but there's something incredibly powerful about just being present with someone else. And Sabrina, let's just do this for grins. I didn't even tell you we're going to do this, so putting you on the spot here.
Okay.
So I'm going to be talking to you, and we'll just do this for 20 seconds or so. I'm going to tell you
Okay.
about what I had for dinner last night, just for the sake of sharing something. And
Okay.
I want you to respond like you normally would, like you and I. We would never be in the same step study because we're not the same gender, but just for the sake
Right.
of an illustration, we're talking and you're responding just like you are right now. You're just like you normally would. But when I say when I raise my finger like this, I want you to
Hmm.
stop responding to me. I want you to stop
Okay.
smiling. If you have to
Okay.
look away, you look away, but I want you to just stop being present with me, okay?
Okay.
So when I do this, you'll stop the response, okay?
Okay.
Just want you watching. I want you to get a feel. I want you to watch Sabrina and just feel what I might be feeling in that, okay? So go. So last night I was really hungry. We got done with Celebrate Recovery and came home and man, I was starving. You just go through
Mm.
Celebrate Recovery and I'm just in this. I got to get something to eat. It was kind of late, and so when I finally got home, I I I realized, what am I going to eat? And okay, I'm going to stop. See, I knew that was coming, but I felt it immediately. I immediately thought, Sabrina doesn't care. She doesn't care about what I'm talking about. Even though I told you what to do, um, something came up in me. There was almost a little bit of panic of, am I making sense? Does she think I'm stupid? Does she even care about what I'm sharing about, right? Sabrina, what
Yes.
was happening for you being on the other end of that, not kind of losing that connection with me in that moment?
Well, I don't. I'm echoing. I don't know if you hear that.
I
I'm
don't.
echoing on my side. Okay. I no longer hear what you're saying. Because my own thoughts and what I was looking at and trying to read kind of overcame
Mm,
what you were saying. I am not present with you anymore, even though, and I've experienced this with people when, they start getting on their cell phones, or I'm talking and they all of a sudden start talking to someone else, or there is a loss of connection for sure. And so, from my end, I just feel disconnected for sure. And I'm the one doing the disconnecting.
yeah.
The purposeful thing that um, I'm making that decision to disconnect from you
Yeah.
in that moment.
And sometimes it's innocent, right? I mean, as a leader,
Yes,
you're thinking, okay, where are we going next? What question are we going next? So I'm looking down.
at
Um,
the leader guide.
yeah,
Yeah,
and so
reminder.
it's another good reason for prepping and knowing, okay, what are we going to cover? What are the questions? Who's going to do what? And when you're talking, I'm locked in on you. Because here's the thing I want to encourage you, especially early on in the step study group, who's the person or persons that attendee is looking at when they share? Me and my co-leader, or whoever's leading the discussion that day, because they don't know the rest of the people in the room, and so they're locked in on me. And if I drop them and go out of the room, I'm still physically here, but emotionally I leave the room, my heart just drops. And so I think just being aware, I just want to make that point that there's some things in your brain that God gave us. They're almost like little catcher's mitts inside our brain called mirror neurons, where when I'm sharing, when I'm connected with you and you are connected with me, it's almost like we're catching each other. And guys, when we experience that catching, that's where change happens. And that's what I love about Celebrate Recovery
Yes.
is we share and we catch each other and we're looking at each other. And online especially, and it's going to feel extra weird to keep locked in on that screen. But even more so, we can get distracted. Well, nobody's looking at me. I guarantee that first-time visitor or that new attendee's watching you. So just wanted to make that point. That's so important to
That's
remember
great.
that as you go into this. So take us to that
Love
first
that.
one there, Sabrina. That,
Okay, so your first fill-in is decide ahead of time, your roles and areas of responsibility. So the fill-in is responsibility. Make sure that you determine it ahead of time. And that's not 15 minutes before you walk in for the first time. Like
mm,
schedule a time ahead of time, week before, and take as long as you need to talk through who's going to do what, because there's a lot of different things that you're talking about, like who's going to do each of the points that we'll go through in the format, like
mm,
the opening or the closing prayer, reading the guidelines, that kind of thing. And one of the things that I'll usually people need to know their roles before the evening and before the meeting starts, because it does feel to the participants, it feels like if you're not ready and you are talking to each other about who's going to do what, that this group isn't, it gives the message this group isn't so important to you, that
mm.
you take the time to be prepared. And so that can translate to I don't matter, to
Yes.
them enough to be prepared. But I will often suggest that in terms of the areas of responsibility, that you either go back and forth and maybe switch what those roles are. So let's say that, I always do the welcome. We set it up so I always do the welcome and someone else always does the music, for
Mm,
example. If we do that throughout the entire time, if for some reason the other leader isn't there, or I have to lead it alone or whatever, I'm not comfortable in the areas and the points that I've never done. And so I usually will recommend, if you go back and forth, switch it up who starts every week, and so that
mm.
you're becoming familiar with all of the different areas that you need to lead.
So good.
um, and or some people will actually switch off. One leader does it one week,
Mm,
one leader does it another. That's a lot of talking and responsibility. So I'll
yes.
usually say, if you want to do that, my suggestion would be have one leader do everything but the guidelines, and have the other leader do the guidelines, and then swap that. So there's
Mm.
different ways to figure out who's going to be responsible for what, and that's up to your personal preferences. But those are just some suggestions I have based on what we've learned over time.
Yeah. And even with the roles and responsibilities, is I always encourage my co-leader to sit across from me. So we're
Oh,
not
great.
right by each other, because we can make eye contact, and we kind of have developed this. We know if something's happening, right? So if my co-leader's leading and somebody is breaking a guideline, I want them to own that and lead as a leader. It's that eye contact. We know, oh, I need to shut this down, or whatever it is. And so, but even what are we going to do if somebody does become suicidal or whatever, right? What are we going to do? And
Yes.
that's part of that, is kind of having a clean understanding of what's our responsibility together today, and how are we going to support
Mhm.
each other. Man, doesn't that just help with your confidence as a leader? You're not kind of going by the seat of your pants, right? It's like,
Absolutely. Because even if you've done this before, with a brand new group that you're starting, it's still always, there's always that awkwardness and kind of feeling off balance a little, because I'm not used to this particular group. Like every group has a different energy and a different culture and a different, interaction kind
yeah,
of feeling. So
that's great.
I love that.
So the second point there is, we encourage you to meet at least 15 minutes before your group. It's such a good habit to get in the practice of, is praying with your co-leader. And it doesn't have to be this big, long, elaborate, just can we just, how are you doing? You okay? How's your heart today? Because sometimes my co-leader or myself may have had a really crazy week, and I just sense, hey, why don't you let me take this week? You just be tonight, right?
Mm.
And let me take this. But let's pray for you. Let's pray for me. Let's pray for the group. Let's pray that God would really touch the hearts of the folks that are coming in here. So we encourage you to do that. So take 3 and 4 kind of, to me, bleed together there. Why don't you
They
kind of
do.
take those together there?
Awesome. Yes. Number 3, respect one another during the meeting. And so that does absolutely bleed into 4. Anything I would say about that is really kind of encapsulated in number 4. So number 3, respect one another during the meeting. And then number 4, do not undermine, compete, or interrupt each other during the meeting.
Mm.
So preparing ahead of time your responsibilities in advance, like Rodney said, will prevent awkward moments between leaders if something kind of comes up, because there won't be as much confusion or misunderstanding about things or how we're going to deal with something. And so you don't have to interrupt each other, or, undermining is a big one.
Mm.
Like, let's say your co-leader ends up, breaking a guideline like that. Listen, that can happen. We're not perfect in this. We're all kind of continuing to learn and grow. So your co-leader might do something that you feel like you need to stop. And if it's something that is like one of the biggies, like gossiping or, whatever, that might be something that you can talk ahead of time where you go, we're going to have a little cue if one of us kind of gets off track during the guidelines. Like, whether it's the look that Rodney was talking about or whatever it is. But you should always have a very united front together, um, not interrupting each other, and showing just that level of respect that I have for my co-leader in this. I'm not better than, I'm not above, I'm not
Mm.
below. We are peers and equals in what we're doing together, and we are here for you together as a united
Yeah.
front.
That's so
So,
important, yeah. Because I don't want them to look at me as the expert. I want them to, we're in this together. I want them
yes.
to value and respect my co-leader as much as they do me. In fact, yeah, you well said. I don't think I can add any more to that. So,
In fact, I was going to say we don't say that we have a leader and a co-leader in RCR. We're all co-leaders. And that's just, it's semantics, but to me it helps with that understanding and feeling that we are co-leaders together in this group.
yes,
There's not a leader and a co-leader. Now, definitely one may have more experience. Maybe this is the second time someone else is leading and the first time this person is leading, but we are still co-leaders together. And
that,
so we don't ever
that's
have that
that's
attitude.
such an important point because we don't call them, assistant to the assistant, right? You are we are we are in this
Yes.
together, and we need to be
Yes.
in this together. It's a lot to
Yes.
carry that. That's why we would like 2 leaders in that. So,
Yes.
next point is we want all conflict to be resolved. To be resolved before leading together. And that's that whole Matthew 18 principle. And I've through the years it's been interesting because we think that we can kind of hide our underlying resentment toward each other, right? It's like, oh, we'll just lead and we'll deal with this at some other point. Or
Or not deal.
I'm not going to talk about this. Yeah, I don't even like you right now. Man, can't you just feel you can cut it with a knife, the tension in the room that everybody's just kind of, they don't know what's going on. They just know that something's different. And so we can't fake that, right? And so even if it's just, hey, we had a disagreement, and maybe we do need to talk it through, but can we, and that's part of that prayer, can we just agree to just put this to the side for tonight or morning or day, whatever you're meeting, and be on the same team because there's too much at stake here. We need to be fully present. Can we agree to do that? Let's pray together about that. And it may come to we agree to disagree, but at least we can, as far as it depends on us, to carry that out. And if you can't get that resolved between each other, that's why your ministry leader's there. Bring that third party in and say, hey, could you just help us sort through this? We're in a little chaotic place, and it's getting a little bit foggy, and we need your guidance to that.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, I usually say try to, practice Matthew 18:15 first,
yeah.
because because we are kind of in the process. Codependency is my issue, and so I hate conflict conversations or awkward or uncomfortable on any level. Like, I do not want to have an uncomfortable conversation, and so if there's going to be any kind of like disagreement, I don't want to go there. And so that's a common thing with people that have been hurt or abused or had trauma or have issues in their life. And so
Mm.
what will happen oftentimes is that the co-leader will go directly to the ministry leader, having never spoken to the co-leader about the issue. And then the co-leader is kind of blindsided, like, whoa, I didn't even know there was an issue going on. And instead of that person going directly to that person first, I know it's hard, and maybe you get help from your sponsor to help you do that and to get the courage to do it. But that's, if we're doing that as leaders, we're modeling that,
Mm.
maybe not by them our participants knowing what's going on, but we're modeling it simply because we're continuing to get along and do things well together, because we do resolve issues between ourselves. And so if at all possible, go directly to the person first and then bring in your ministry leader if you can't seem to get it resolved.
Yeah, what a great opportunity to work our own recovery, right?
Yes. Oh
in
my
the
gosh.
midst of
So
leadership.
many opportunities.
So tell us about sponsoring people in a group, Sabrina.
Okay, so when leading a step study group, be careful of how many people you sponsor. Um, Leaders need to keep a healthy balance in their recovery and avoid burnout. And so, oftentimes, as the leaders in a group, you're going to be the first person that the participants ask, "Can you be my sponsor? Can you be my sponsor? Can you be my sponsor?" And it's, especially if you struggle with codependency, it can be easy to go, "Oh, yeah, of course, I want to help everybody. I'm taking ownership of everybody's recovery in the group. Like, I'm going to take care of all of you."
Yeah.
And and then you end up getting burned out, frustrated because expectations aren't being met on either side. So you have to make sure that you're taking care of you first in your role, and encourage people, like, I'm not able to do that right now, but I'm certainly available to answer questions here or there. My thing is always, I'm happy to have coffee with you once in a while if you have a particular thing you want to talk through. But I can't sponsor, because for me, sponsorship means we talk with each other and meet at least once a week. And
Hmm.
so I don't have that kind of availability because I'm already sponsoring other people or whatever.
Yeah.
So
And that's a good point, to think about as a leader and co-leader. Um, Make sure your participants are hearing from you other than just when you show up for your step study. It's not that you can have the investment like a sponsor, like Sabrina was saying. I can't meet with you and go in depth like you would with a sponsor. But I need to hear from my leaders. I need to,
mm,
send an encouragement. Some people use group me. We use group me. We use text over the
we do
years.
too.
Just, hey guys, good morning. I just want to share this word with you and just remind you who you are in Christ. I love you. I'm praying for you by name. Those kind of things. Sometimes I'll send something personally to one of them individually, maybe based off something that they shared. Just say, hey, I'm just checking in on you. How you doing? I love you. Yada yada yada. That kind of stuff that they hear from us is so important. But yeah, that's such a good reminder. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Right? It's so hard to
That's
tell.
scripture.
It's hard to tell people no, and I just tell them, this is a good thing to be talking about in your step study early on. Is we want you to start finding a sponsor, and it's going to take time to find the right person. Pray about it, and
Yes.
and be prepared. You're going to probably get many no's before you get a yes.
Hmm.
And I always go back to this: if it's this important, don't you know the enemy would try to do everything he can to discourage and slow this process down? So don't
Hmm.
give up. Don't give up.
Hmm.
If you get a no, and pray, God, would you send the right person? And God will send you that right person. But as a leader, back to that point, make sure you're protecting yourself, because what you'll do is you'll actually become resentful and bitterness
Yes.
toward those that you're shepherding, and that doesn't work out too well. Show me empathy. I hate you. Don't do that.
Why
um,
are you expecting so much of me?
yeah.
Whereas it's you accepted that responsibility.
Yeah.
And
Who said yes? You're the one that said yes. So.
exactly.
All right, here's a big one, and we won't get into the guidelines per se. We did cover them in the last video in depth, and maybe we'll do a special guidelines training at some point. Um, but the guidelines, remember, the guidelines also apply to you, and that
Amen.
it seems like a Captain Obvious statement, but one of my biggest pet peeves is when I hear someone say, I know this is crosstalk, but.
But, yeah.
I know this.
Or I know I'm not supposed to wisdom share, but I
Yes.
just have to say.
It's like, let me just give you my wisdom, right? Um, yeah. And here's the thing, and we talked about that, when we break guidelines as a leader, what we're saying is, I don't value these. And why does that become a big issue? Well, if the biggest one, that anonymity and confidentiality, is on that guideline sheet, and I'm breaking crosstalk faithfully, right? Then as a participant, I'm going to start thinking, okay, if they're willing to break that guideline, will they break this guideline? And can I
Yeah.
trust this person? Because they seem to kind of reject authority and following these guidelines. And so I don't know if I can trust this person. And so now you've got doubt, you've affected safety, and I'm not going to be vulnerable with you or the rest in the group. And now the dynamics of your group have just, they've dropped, and it's become unhealthy. So make sure they apply to you. You're following them. What a great example you can be, to be able to follow the very thing that you're asking them to follow. So,
Yes,
all right,
absolutely.
take a
And
set. Oh, go ahead.
part of that is also, please remember that the leader's role is to facilitate the meeting and take part in the sharing.
Yes,
So,
facilitate and participate, right?
yes,
It's like,
yes,
I'm in recovery too. And I encourage you, rethink those questions, even if you've written them once before. Maybe God is peeling a layer of that onion off that you didn't even realize, that needs to
yes,
be addressed. So, yeah, thanks for
yes,
adding that there.
yes. It's my recovery too. And honestly, that's the most important part of it. I am facilitating, but, you know, and I need to keep this on track and healthy and protect the health of this group and the safety of it. But I need to be doing my own recovery. We don't transition to a place of, now I am simply helping those people that need it, that haven't received it yet. Like, I'm still one of those people.
Man,
So
that can be a dangerous, slippery slope, can it?
it can. And I've also, kind of on this topic, I've also experienced where leaders end up putting too much pressure on themselves.
Mm,
Once they step out of being a participant into the leadership role, they try to take responsibility for the entire health and recovery of the group. Like, if someone drops out of the group, it's my responsibility and my fault. And I feel guilt in that. That's their decision. Like,
mm,
we can absolutely speak to them and talk to them and hopefully help them get to a place where they step back in or they re-engage or whatever, but their recovery is their responsibility.
mm.
And so,
Yeah, and that's so good. Maybe speak to this now. I think, we talked about this on the last video, but give it a couple, maybe 3 to 4 weeks before you actually jump into the books. And if you're interested, I mean, I know Sabrina's probably got some things they've done. We can share. We actually put together a couple videos that I give my leaders to watch before they go into leading a step study group, to kind of think about week 1, things to cover, things to talk about, and then week 2, things to talk about, things to cover, to kind of set the table for that step study group. But one of the things
love that.
we talked about this last week, but one of the things I'll ask people, and kind of speaking to that, is it my responsibility to work your recovery, or is it yours? Is ask the
Mm,
participants that week 1. We always ask, what brings you into recovery, and
mm-hmm.
then what's your level of motivation for change? If 1 to 10, and 10 is my most motivated for change, where are you? And I always tell them, there's no right or wrong answer. Tell us where you are and why. And,
Oh, that's good.
and that's such a good thing to just think about. It's like, what is my motivation? I've had guys say, well, I'm a 3. My wife made me come here. uh, and then a few weeks later, they'll say, hey, can I just share this? I was a 3. I'm actually a 6 now, because I'm
Wow.
hearing you guys share, and it's really blessing my heart, and I want to be here. And so you see that motivation change. What's cool is to
I love
bring that
that.
back when you get into book 2, when we're getting into spiritual inventory, right? Step 4. then you can actually, leading into that, in the moral lesson, we kind of talk about confirming our commitments, right? Is I'll bring that back and say, as a part of the devotional time, it's like, hey, several weeks ago we talked about your level of motivation. Where are you now? And
Mm-hmm.
why is it different? Or is it the same? And tell me why. And I've never seen where it doesn't at least stay the same or get higher. And it's such great oxygen going into that step 4. And what that does as a leader is it takes that off me to go, it's not my responsibility to make sure everybody works their recovery. Sabrina,
Right.
you've probably said this too, but I say it all the time. I can't work harder than you on your recovery.
Yes. Yes. Oh my
That's
gosh.
exhausting.
Yes.
It's like pushing a
Put that
big boulder up the hill,
put that on a t-shirt, Rodney.
right? That's right.
It's so important.
So yeah, thank you for making that point about spinning out if people do drop out, which can
Yes.
happen. So
Yes.
take us through that final point, and then we'll get into the format here.
Okay, group leaders need to be prepared to commit for at least a year, for 1 year. This is the average time that it takes to work through a step study. This fluctuates depending on a lot of factors. The size and the dynamics of the group bond that develops over time. So, which affects how deep people share, whether they share for 1 or 2 minutes on average or use that full 5 minutes that I got. I've been in a group that took longer than a year because it was a like women's staff or
Mm.
pastors' wives step study, and we started as a closed group, but we shared the full 5 minutes from day one on every single question. So it took a little bit longer, but the depth of sharing was so amazing that it just inspired us. And so we definitely took longer than a year. And I kept telling them, guys, this isn't normal, but it's so good. It was so good. And so we just loved it. But you want to be committed to that, in that headspace from the beginning, that this is something that is not a short-term thing, and don't get in a place at any point where we need to rush through this. We need to get done. We need to get done. You may
Yeah.
hear that from participants if you're going to lead it, and just give some encouragement, and don't allow that pushback to rush you or allow your group to be rushed,
Yeah.
because explain that there's a reason it takes so long. All of these steps build on each other. All of these questions build on each other.
Yep.
Recovery happens in these layers of growth and
Mm-hmm.
learning, and so we need to let the process happen. When I first started CR, I came from another type of recovery program where you kind of did it on your own with a sponsor, and you could fly through the steps if you wanted to, or it could take 3 years to go through the steps.
Yeah.
And I felt like this was too long, a year, but I have learned after doing many step studies that it takes as long as it needs to take,
Yeah.
and we need to let it take that long.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a good reminder to tell people, especially in those first couple weeks, and keep reminding them that, guys, this is a year process, but this is a lifetime practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Love that.
it's not getting out, I'm done, right? No, this is just the next part of your life, right? So why not just live your recovery and live your life, and you're going to be with me over the next year. Let's stay connected. Let's stay tuned into the process. And by the way, and I tell them, this is the first week. It feels like a year's a long time. I get it. I thought the same thing. But you are
Mm-hmm.
literally going to blink, and this is going
And
to
it'll
be
be
over.
gone.
And then you're all going to be
And
crying because we're not meeting anymore.
you're going to be like, what do I do now? I don't have my step study.
Yeah.
I hear that over and over.
So trust the process, right? That sounds like a familiar
Yes.
thing we say a lot. So, okay,
Yes.
so we talked about the leader role and objectives. Let's talk about the kind of the meeting format. And I was talking about this on the last video. You have these printouts that you literally have in front of you. I've got the same crumbly. Sabrina was giving me a hard time for not having a binder, but I use the same crumbly little sheet meeting format because I just can't part ways with it. There's too many memories in 15 years, but I
Oh,
have it in front of me, and I read the first thing, then the second, then the third, and I go right down the list, and I lead my step study group every single week by following this. And so this is kind of what we're talking about. This is what you would have in front of you. But here's some key things we want to address is start the meeting on time every single week. It's going to be a little bit more challenging online because, especially early on, people are trying to figure out how to get on. But once they kind of get in that groove, you really want to get in the habit of starting on time. And there's a couple things that make that important. Is if I get here on time, like this meeting right here, if we said we're starting at 10 a.m. and we waited till 10:15 to start because we wanted more people to be here, right? Then you'd be going, well, why didn't I just come at 10:15, right? So you're actually training your group to not come on time, the ones that are there, and you're kind of disrespecting those that did show up. So make sure you do start on time, and I think you need to kind of point out the elephant in the room that sometimes things are going to happen. You're going to oversleep. I lead a 5:30 a.m. step study group, so sometimes that happens. If you are going to come in late, two things. One, if you're the guy coming in late, please walk in respectfully. You don't need to slam your books down. Oh man, the traffic was crazy, and all you wouldn't.
Or waving at everybody.
Yeah, hey, I miss you. I want you to come in and quietly sit down and pick up where we picked up. We want you to show up on time, but if something happens, that life happens, then walk in quietly. And the second thing is if you're the participants that are already here and someone walks in and Rodney is sharing, for example, I want every one of you to keep your eyes locked on Rodney because what he's sharing is important. And if you take your eyes off and you start waving at so-and-so, now you've totally dropped back to that whole still face thing, right? I've just checked out from you. And I will lose my train of thought and start thinking, even though I know everybody's just saying hi, I just kind of slowly shut up, and that's all I have to share, but those kind of people that show up late all the time, make sure you address that early on and just make sure people know to show up on time. So,
absolutely.
What's the second one there, Sabrina?
So welcome the group and do this every time as long as you're meeting. Just so glad you guys are here. Welcome. This is a great time for us to get together. It doesn't need to be long, brief, and then the leader always introduces him or herself with the CR introduction. This is especially important in the beginning because of newcomers. So you want to establish who you are and modeling what a CR introduction looks like from the get-go. So people know that, I or we are the co-leaders in this group, but continue to establish that just for just the continued routine of it. Still introduce yourself. Like we always want to model claiming our issue and who we are, and that our identity is in Christ, that we are believers in Jesus Christ if we are. And that is always something that we say in our group when we get to that part. So, but always welcome the group.
Yeah, that's so good. And people need to know that you see them. And that sounds like a silly thing. It's like, of course they see me. Of course I see them. But something about just taking a deep breath and say, I'm so glad you guys are here. I know this is scary for some of you. And look them in the eye and go around the room and just tell them how much you value. Online it's a little trickier, so just look them in the camera lens, right?
Yeah, just look to each square and they'll get it.
That's funny. The problem is the squares are different on all of our screens.
That's true. Look into your camera and you'll be looking in everybody's eyes.
Yeah, that's right. But that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
It is. It's a big deal.
Yeah. So open with a word of prayer. I just caution you, this isn't the time to go into a big elaborate prayer. I talked about this last week. Just something simple. God, thank you for blessing this time. Would you help us to open our minds and hearts today and speak through us and encourage each other through this? In Jesus' name, amen. Something simple that just kind of sets the table for your meeting. So what's that next point there, Sabrina?
You may also want to include a time of worship. And we didn't used to do this when we first started our step studies. It felt strange and awkward to us to add a time of worship music. But once we started incorporating it, oh my gosh, what a difference it makes in preparing everybody, preparing their hearts, getting connected to the Lord, taking a breath away from the world and everything that's been going on during that day. We've had, a few of our groups even sing during that time. Most of them actually don't. And, we'll usually kind of talk about if a leader feels led to it or feels strongly about it. Like, if you guys want to join in, please feel free to.
Mm,
But most of the time we use it as a time for reflection and
yeah.
for introspection. And, I always 100% of the time during this time close my eyes
Yes.
and just listen to the words,
Mm,
listen to the lyrics and the music, and just relax. A time to take a deep breath,
yeah.
um, and allowing others to do the same. And for me, just kind of as a practice, we only do one worship song. The ALT says you can do, two or three, but we
Hmm.
usually stick with one, just to make sure that we don't take too much time away from the
Mm.
sharing time, but give that moment.
Yeah, yeah, and I think just the thing that I was in this season, maybe you do a couple songs, kind of a thing, because we're not able to meet corporately, and it's a good, everybody mute your
True.
screen if you're online. But I think one of the things I always caution people is don't try to emulate the large group general meeting night in your step
Hmm.
study, because if we give them everything that they get, and this includes kind of a big open share time, right? If we're doing open share
Yes.
and worship and all that in the midst of our step studies, it's like I don't need to go to my general meeting night. So don't try
And
to.
you take all the time away from
That's right.
sharing on the
It's like,
question.
why is this taking 2 years to finish? So, uh, so yeah, I love that. Just set the tone, close your eyes, and let's get in the room here. Sometimes I'll use it too out of when we're in step 4, we're talking about something really hard. And man, thank you guys for sharing some really scary things. Remember Isaiah 118. No matter how deep the stain of your sins, right? He's going to wash you as clean as freshly fallen snow. Hey, as we wrap up this morning or tonight, I just want you to close your eyes. I'm just going to play this song, and I just want you to hear this message of who you are. And I might play like "You Say" by Lauren Daigle, just that identity piece, just to kind of okay, I said some hard things, but that's not who I am. That's not my identity, etc. So there's some strategic ways that you can use worship too, depending on where you are in the steps as well. So
Yeah, we always I always searched for songs the week before that matched what our questions were for that week, or the acrostic was for that week, and that makes it very powerful.
yeah, very good. All right, introductions, and if you're brand new, introductions is just where we're kind of. Let me just explain why we introduce ourselves the way we do. So if you're watching the first of this, you heard us. I'm a grateful believer. I'm a beloved son or daughter. However you say that, we're starting with that is because we want our position in faith to be the first thing. It becomes our identity, right? Not I'm an
Hmm.
alcoholic, I'm a porn addict, I'm an angry person, right? Because we want people to know that your identity is not in what you walked in here with. And those first few weeks, you really need to really take some time to explain this so that they know why we introduce ourselves, because it feels weird if you've never been in that. But
Right.
I need to know my identity is in Jesus Christ. But I also say this, if you don't know Jesus as your higher power, your Lord and Savior, don't say that you are a grateful believer. It's not a just kind of robotic thing. Go ahead and
Yes.
say, I'm still trying to figure this out, or
Hmm.
I'm a non believer. It's okay. We're not going to get kicked out of the group. We just want you to be honest about where you are and then state what you struggle with. The main point
Right.
is your identity is not in your struggle. We want you to know that your identity in Christ is what's going to bring that lasting change. And so I've seen atheists come out of our group, given that permission to say, I'm an atheist and I struggle with, come out of that saying, I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. And that's the cool thing about the process as we get
Yes.
into that turn lesson and an action lesson at the end of book 1. There's a big process there of reminding ourselves of our faith story, but also an opportunity to receive Christ, to make him my true identity in Jesus
Yes.
Christ. So it's so important to take some time to walk through that. And don't be afraid early on to just give space and say, hey, this is going to feel weird. Some of you are going to mess this up. It's okay.
Yes.
And it's scary to say what you struggle with, but I'm going to do it first. Watch how I do this. Now we're going to go around. And as I do it, it's say, okay, let's take a deep breath.
Hmm.
Y'all have a pulse still? You, you feeling okay? Some of you thought you would die when you said that, but you're still alive.
Right.
Good for you guys
Right.
for doing that. That's your first step to be vulnerable, and I appreciate you doing that. So just acknowledging that so that they know, hey, we see how hard that was. It was hard for us, but you did
Hmm.
it. And so taking
Yeah.
time in those first few weeks. So, and then
Yeah. Well, I
go,
was going to say, we always talk about too at that point about not getting too many introductions, too many issues listed in that introduction as well. You know,
yes, thanks for saying that. It's like I struggle with this and this and this and
and
this
this
and
and
this
this
and
and
this
this
and
and this.
this and this and this and this and this and that. It's like, which, by the way, could be me if I did
It's
that.
all of us. It's all of us. The thing is that what we always explain in our group is, what are your primary one or two things that are really causing havoc to your life? Let's identify that first.
Yep,
We'll work on the other things as we go through.
yep, exactly. What's causing those havoc? So take
Yes.
us through then. What do we do with the guidelines there then?
So we read the small group guidelines every single time. As long as you meet, you always read the guidelines for the safety of the meeting, to keep established in that. People think sometimes if we're a core group and we've been doing this for a long time that we don't really need to read them anymore. But honestly, sometimes with a core group, it's more important because you can also get a little bit more lax and think, well, we know each other so well. I can cross talk and give this person advice, as a result of it. So we always want to read those guidelines. It helps participants stay focused on,
Mm-hmm.
what the guidelines are about. We do a refocus, and if we need to, in a more in-depth way per guideline. So if a lot of people are breaking the first guideline and not staying focused on their own thoughts, feelings, and actions, we might go over that in more depth one week and just do the core basic part of the guideline, for the rest of them. And eventually with our core group, we do get to a point where we're just reading that core stuff. And in our groups, we actually, once we get going after a while, I'll usually ask the participants, hey, Susan, would you mind reading the guidelines today? And they
Mm.
just do it right out of the participants' guides. It's the super short version of it. And so that gets them involved in taking ownership of doing things in the group as well.
Yeah, yeah. So go back and again, we may at some point do just a guideline training, but go back to last week's video because we kind of walk through the guidelines, but for the sake of time, we won't
Mm-hmm.
unpack those here on this video. So I'm going to move us along here. So then we do a short devotional. This is not a time to do a big, extensive Bible study. The study is Celebrate Recovery. And so the devotional is really just geared around just kind of something to kind of get our hearts in the room. I love the 365 devotional, day
Us
devotional.
too.
You can read a devotional in about a minute and a half, and I'll read it. I may share a couple thoughts and say, hey, let's let a couple people share on what speaks to your heart. As we get through that, I personally don't spend more than 10 to 12 minutes on a devotional, and that's even on the longest because I want to get into the study. That's what they're there for.
Therefore,
Even if they don't share on that, just hearing that devotional can kind of get their hearts in the room.
yeah,
So
and that's something I've never heard that before. We've always just read it and then we move into the next
yeah,
thing,
you could
like
totally do that.
something to
Yep.
think about, and not we don't actually do sharing on it. So that's really cool to hear as a way to do that. But again, it does take away from
Yep.
time of, so a smaller group may be more able
Yep.
to do that than a larger group.
Yeah, and maybe one or two people share even at that, just kind of move along. So
Yes.
then we read the 8 recovery principles, and that's important because, and I always say this every week, hey, we read these every week because we need to know where we are, where we've been, and where we're going, and so we kind of see the progression. Just remind ourselves that this is based on God's word and God's plan for us, and this is the map. This is where we're going. And so let's read that. So we read the principle, and then we have everybody read the corresponding verse from Matthew chapter 5 out loud together. And we take turns going around the room to read the principle.
Mm-hmm.
We all read it. And it's a good way to kind of get your group involved. So
Yep.
take us to that next one there, Sabrena.
So when you begin a new lesson, read the acrostic from the participants guide. So We actually read the acrostic every time as long as we're in it. So we might take 2 or 3 weeks in one lesson,
Hmm.
depending on the size of the group. And so each time we get to this point, we do read the acrostic again, just as kind of a reminder, what we're talking about, to kind of refocus our minds.
Yeah, that's great. It's a good way to get people involved too, to go around and read the
Yep.
acrostic and yeah. So when we come back in, we do the same thing. We hit the acrostic real quick just to get our minds in the room. Okay, we picked up on question 4 or wherever we left off.
Mhm.
So, and then the group is sharing the participant guide questions, and that's so important, especially in those few weeks, to really talk about. And this is a good time to talk about when you're talking about their motivation level. Is spend some time. Okay, what does it mean to be motivated? What does that look like? That means I'm showing up on a consistent basis. Life happens, business trips, all that kind of stuff, but we need to show up. We need to write out our answers. And sometimes it's bullet form, sometimes it's paragraph form. All of us are different in that way, but at least we need to know that you've spent some time thinking about this. And we want you to share from your answers, as you were talking about last week, Sabrina. Maybe you add a couple additional thoughts, but in general, we want you to be able to read what you've written out. And isn't it fascinating? You can tell those that are on the spot coming up with the answer on this question, right? Because they
Mhm.
ramble, and there's no clear thought to it. They're just rambling.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, you're spending a year of your life in this group. That's part of that motivation. Do you want the change? Hey guys, take the time to do it. If you do one question a day, most of the time you're going to be able to get your homework done. You can
Yep.
handle one question a day, right?
Yeah.
Just
This
take
can
time.
be your quiet time every day, and
Ex-
it's just one question.
exactly. Yeah. So, so then we kind of move into we're kind of wrapping up. We go around the room. Everybody's sharing the questions, right? And then it's so important as a leader, whoever's facilitating that group, to have access to see the clock, because you need to be aware of the clock. If that's on your
Mhm.
phone, I don't like to use my phone as my clock because I don't want them thinking I'm reading emails and texts. But if you tell them, hey, just going to be using this to watch the time, nothing else, just make sure they know that. But you're keeping track of the time. We got time for one more question, that kind of deal. But then
Mhm.
you want to kind of start the process of kind of winding down the group. So then we take prayer requests. Um, and sometimes groups may or may not do this, and they all do it different. I would love to hear how do you take prayer requests in your local ministry, Sabrina?
We pretty much recommend, and this is our suggestion, it's not the requirement. We generally recommend doing cards where you fill in your prayer request, we put it in a basket, and then we go around, and everyone who put in a prayer request takes a prayer request to pray for that person throughout the week, rather than doing prayer requests in group. And we do
Mm-hmm.
that for a couple reasons. Number one, again, it takes away more time from being
Time,
able
yeah.
to answer questions. And then another reason is that we could take an hour doing prayer requests, if depending on how in depth people get with their prayer requests and what's going on. It could just take a lot of time away from the group.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about, if you do decide to do prayer requests, try to keep them short,
Mm-hmm.
try to keep them focused on yourself and your recovery more than anything, because as we all probably know, prayer requests can turn into a way to gossip about other people.
No.
And so we talk about that with our leaders, that you talk about it with your people
Yeah.
and say, if it's not your business to share something that you want prayer for, don't share it.
Yeah.
Say, can you guys please pray for a family member for a situation they're going through? God knows the what's going on.
Yeah.
But more or less, like, pray about yourself and your recovery and that kind of stuff. But to save time, and because now we have someone praying for us throughout the week, not just tonight here.
Yeah.
We know someone's committed to. Every time I see that, I put it on my counter in my bathroom so that, and I, keep it folded. I know what's in there, but just as a reminder to pray for them every day, or
Mm.
put it in your phone or whatever you use to remind you.
Yeah, that's good. Another thing that we do locally is now early on, we use the cards too. I'm kind of looking through them, make sure there's not someone I think I want to take my life kind of thing, because I don't want to hand that to a brand new person and go,
Oh, that's a great point.
but just kind of make sure there's nothing real heavy. And then we pass them out. But one of the things we add to that is your name and your phone number. Is I want to get them trained to pick up that phone when things are tough. And so
Mm-hmm.
I want you to call this person. It's going to be scary, and we kind of point out the elephant in the room. But even if you get a voicemail, just say, "Hey, I'm praying for you. Just wanted to let you know that. Have a great week," kind of thing. But to reach out and get used to, and the kind of the thing that I'm telling them is, if I can't get in the habit of picking up the phone when things are somewhat okay, I'm never going to call you when things are chaotic and in crisis, right? So I want to
Good point.
train them how to do that. And we've even gotten, as we get further down the road, is if I got your card, Sabrina, I want you to look at your card and who's on it. And I want you to look at, this is after several weeks, I want you to look them in the eye and say, Sabrina, I'm going to call you this week so I can pray for you. It's just another level of prayer and commitment that I'm bought into this. And now someone is going to hold me accountable to that. And it just helps us to kind of not be alone in this process.
Love that.
So then we do what there? What's that wrapping it up
We
there?
close in prayer. Leader or co-leader may lead in a closing prayer. Ask one of the participants to pray. I would just be careful. We'll usually say, does anyone feel led to pray? As opposed to, hey, so-and-so, would you like to pray? Because some people are scared to death of doing that.
They may never come
Years and
back.
years ago, yes, years and years and years ago, before my husband was even a believer, we were going to this church, and we went to a small group. And one day the leader said, hey, Alan, would you close us in prayer? And he was like, really?
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah. And I was like, no. And it was such a awkward moment for him, but he was like, I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
And he could have run screaming away and never came back.
Yeah.
Like, if they're going to ask me to do that, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And so allowing, I think in the sponsor sponsee relationship, we talk about this in that training. Like, that could be the time where you start leading people into learning how to pray out loud with other
Yeah. I
people.
love that.
Comfortable with it.
Well, I want to make a
So,
point too, because I saw someone ask this, and it's hard to get our mind around in person on Zoom. Obviously, you can't do prayer cards in a Zoom online step study group. So you may have to do the
true.
group me, and that's where they share prayer requests. And so, but I think you still could model even on that, saying, hey, we're going to kind of assign, I want you guys to call each other or call one person in the group this week. There's some things that you can do if you're in an online group. So thanks for asking that question, because it was able
Good
to
question
flip
to
my
do that
brain back to,
creatively.
it's like, oh yeah, we got
Yes.
to think Zoom too. So a lot of this training we were talking about in person as well. So um,
Yes.
yeah, one thing I want to just say, because this is so important, again, early on, people don't know our internal language of Celebrate Recovery. Typically, which I don't know if we'll ever hold hands again in a circle. I don't know with this COVID stuff, but even online,
Heartbreaking.
when we're starting, we have this routine where we pray, and then we do the Lord's Prayer, and then we have this kind of internal chant that we do, right? Keep coming back because it works if you work
Because
it.
it works if you work it.
And I just remember the first time I was in a circle and they were holding hands, and it was like, keep coming back and you work and you're working, and it's like, what is going on? Why are they flipping my hands? And so I
Oh
think
my
it's
gosh.
so important that you say, hey,
Yes.
we're going to say something, and some of you are familiar with this. You'll pick up on it. This is what we're going to do.
Oh,
You're
I love it.
walking them through this so that they're not freaking out going, what is just happened here, right? So even the Lord's Prayer, don't assume people know that, right? Just
Right.
take them through that and take some time in those first early meetings so that people don't feel like, oh, I'm not on the inside. I don't know the language.
Yes.
And so again, a lot of that is kind of geared towards starting out and early on, but it's so important to helping them stick around that they feel like they're a part of this. And that's why I keep emphasizing those first few weeks to not just assume and just kind of, leave the train station without them, so to speak. So
I keep wanting to laugh, Rob. Picturing that. Oh my gosh. I wanted to comment real quick too. Like, we had someone one time in one of our groups decide that because of something that someone shared in a prayer request, that they wanted to lay hands on this person. The leader's like, let's come around this person and lay hands on them. And
good.
Later, one of the participants came to me and said that made me so uncomfortable.
I
And it
don't
was
know you
before
people. Yeah.
right. And it
Yeah.
was before the group closed. It wasn't even like optional. It didn't feel that way to her. And so be careful in terms of the prayer time, how churchies you get with
Yeah.
people that aren't there yet. Like, we're doing recovery, and God is a huge part of that. Jesus is a part of that. We don't shy away from that in any way, shape, or form, but make sure that things that might overwhelm people that are like, I don't understand what's going on or what you're doing, that could chase them away as
Yeah.
well.
It's
And
so good.
so just be careful in that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that I want to get to a few questions
The
here.
questions, yes.
Yeah. Have you seen some coming
I've
through?
got a bunch from Mary, so I
Okay.
can just
Yeah.
kind of read them off if you want.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Am I able to be a leader if I'm not able to be a leader again if I can't attend large group because I'm immune compromised? Can I be an online small group leader? So basically, while their group reopens, I'm immune compromised. Can I still be a leader online?
Yeah. And this is going to be a kind of a local church ministry directive, but I'm going to say, especially in that case, if they're compromised, why wouldn't you let them lead a step study group, right? That's all they can
Yep.
do right now. They're staying plugged in, they're ministering. And don't forget, step study groups are such a leadership factory, right? And so if I have some willing and able leaders that can lead the step study group, I want them to help me in really raising people up. And so knowing that not everybody's going to be able to come to every single Friday. We're on Friday nights, going to be able to come to our Friday nights. I don't want to become legalistic with that. I just want to keep reinforcing the values, right? This is why that we do this and why it's important to our recovery. But the answer for me would be yes. If you're compromised, if you were in my ministry, I'd say, hey, yeah, you can't come. lead the step study group. Let's go. So
we have the same thing happening with one of our leaders of our open share groups. He is immune compromised. We were set to reopen this week, but that got pulled because we've had some things going on where increased numbers and someone in our church actually was diagnosed. And so we pulled back, and our plan was that immune compromised leader would hold an online open share group. It may or may not be for his issue. It may be a mixed issue group that he leads, and we still have someone at the church lead the issue specific group. But for step studies, we would do the same thing. Like, we want there to be, that will be our first choice for who leads our open CRCR open share groups or step study groups, are those that are immune compromised. So
yeah, good. Yeah.
The books 5 through 8, do they need to be a step study? So that, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, yeah, with the journey continues. You're talking about the journey continues. We've been really covering the journey begins, but yeah, you don't have to be in a group setting for that. I would encourage try to get at least 3 or 4 people. I've been doing it with sponsees. Just to kind of go deeper with them. So I meet with them anyway. And so we worked through the Journey Continues curriculum in a triad. And that was pretty effective just to kind of meet. We followed the guidelines, we shared, we kind of did the same model, but we didn't have a big group like we did in the,
yeah, we did the same thing at RCR. So does the steps keep you motivated in recovery? Yes.
Amen.
It'll get you out of a stuck place. It'll get you, back on track. It will keep you motivated. If you're not in a stuck place, it truly 100% takes you to another level in your recovery.
Yeah, well said.
Okay. Can we have people from other churches, CRs, in our online step study?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you talked about this a little bit last week. Best practice would be try to point them to their own church. And the reason for that is when we come out of this, if I'm a part of Sabrina's local group in Georgia, let's say Alan is leading a group, I'm not going to be able to go to his Celebrate Recovery when this is all over. And so I'd rather be a part of that community that's in my local area. That being said, some of you don't have any Celebrate Recoveries around you, and that would be the exception. You say, hey, there's no one around me that I can be a part of, so can I be a part of your
Yes.
steps? That would be the exception, but not the best
Yes.
practice. So.
Right, definitely. And or if your CR or the CRs around you are not doing online or meeting face to
Yes,
face, that
definitely.
would be another
Yeah, thank
exception
you.
to that.
Very
And
well.
so the goal is then at some point, once they are offering it or a CR opens, you need to get connected physically, because face to face and being there is the most important thing.
Yeah, good.
Should I take a break after doing 6 step studies back to back, including books 5 through 8? That's up to you, brother, sister, whoever it is. I had one of my sponsees one time reach out to me and say, she had just finished her step study and she was struggling, had a hard time even staying in a step study. It was like the first time she completed one after trying 3 or 4 different times. She just had a hard time. And she had someone in our CR tell her, you can't do a step study back to back, so you can't join the next step studies that are coming up. And so she talked to me and I was like, oh, no. That's your decision. If you feel like you need a step study again and you want to jump right back in, you do that. Nobody needs to make that decision for you. Like, as your sponsor, I can give you some recommendations and say, I don't think it's a good idea or why or whatever, but it's still your decision.
Yeah.
So that's the way I feel about it personally.
Yeah.
Like, there shouldn't be rules put on people about how long they need to wait in between groups. We do recommend waiting a few months to do a 5 through 8 to kind of work that process after doing A Journey Begins. But again, it's just a recommendation. It's not like you have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it goes back to your motive. What's my motive? Is it because I feel pressured? I want people to like me, or I need this? So if your motives are in the right place, then go for it. But checking your rhythm and balance is always a good practice to make sure you don't run yourself in the ground. So you're around for the long haul. So
absolutely. Can books 5 through 8 be done on your own, basically?
Yeah, I mean, you could walk through that. You're not going to get the value out of that. There's something about being vulnerable with another human being and looking them in the eye and hearing them. You're going to grow from hearing other people too. Part of recovery is not just what I share. A bigger part of it is the listening and how when I hear my guys share, it's like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this a while, and you guys are blessing my socks off. Right? It's
teaching me something or giving me something I need in my recovery, for sure.
Yeah. Maybe one more, depending on how long it is. We're on here almost pushing an hour and a half. So
hour and a half.
We could do this for hours, though, couldn't we, Sabrina?
We could. Training is what I love.
Yeah.
So
I love sandwiches too. But
oh, that's nice.
Oh, I like it. Oh.
I'm kind of scrolling.
That kind of threw you.
You keep sharing, man, and I'll look for a question.
Let me see if I can find
a lot of them are coming through. I think are a lot of the same kind.
Okay. Well.
Oh, so kind of mid-step. Maybe we talk about that real quick, and that can be the last one. Any other ones we'll jump back on at some point and try to answer your questions that maybe didn't get answered.
Yeah.
But this one is like, our step study starts in September and would like to return to the one we started, and our co-leader had to step down. Can I step up in that place?
Yeah.
So they're kind of already going. They lost one of their step study leaders.
Yeah. And that happens sometimes, right? I mean, you kind of make do and you try to, we've had where I've lost one of the co-leaders, and the one leader carries it, and there might be a participant that's been in there that's kind of the emergency person. If something goes wrong, then you're going to be the point person to keep the group going. So you just try to adapt. I'm all for
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep the group moving forward instead of just shutting it down if you can at all costs. But sometimes that's just I've had a group where I just had to completely shut it down just because they didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
leaders, and that's the way it
Yeah,
was, and I hate that. But um,
it's unfortunate.
yeah, yeah. So
Yep. I do want to answer one more that came up, and then we'll definitely, and I think I'll maybe compile these into a document and
yeah,
get them up on our Facebook page. But
great.
also remember that the CRCR um, portion of our celebraterecovery.com page has an FAQ section where you can actually ask a question there, and we'll get that answered
Yeah,
online.
great.
So
Yeah.
you can utilize that as well. So this one is this is a fun one. Well, it's not fun. It's just interesting to me. How can you share 5 minutes with the limited space to write in the book? And the reason that's interesting to me is because when people got to the point where they were saying you can only read what you've written, one
Mm,
of my biggest arguments to that is there's not even enough room in the
yeah.
books in the space to
No.
write that much.
No.
So that was not kind of the original intention. And so if you want to write it in full paragraph form, which a lot of people do prefer
Mm-hmm.
that, you just use a journal or a separate notebook or whatever. We don't actually write in our step books. We bought a set of them, and
Yep.
for every step study we do, we use a new notebook or whatever. Some people use an app in their phone, and that's kind of up to the CR group, because some people don't allow you to pull your phone out. But
Yep. Yep.
um,
That's good.
yeah, so that's how you write it out longer, is you just
Yes.
got to put it somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Notebook or a journal is a good thing to just
Yes.
have, but yeah,
Yeah.
one thing I think just in all of this, we're trying to set you up in this pandemic to equip you guys with some extra tools. We've never done this before where we use advanced leadership training guide material and do live like this. So hopefully it's helpful for you. We're trying to stretch and flex and do the things we can to help you guys. But I always want to remind you, you have incredible state representatives. And so some of these
Yes.
questions that you're asking, could be a Zoom cup of coffee with your rep and just say, hey, tell me about this or this or this or this. They will most
Absolutely.
definitely sit with you. So utilize the CRCR page, but don't be afraid to reach out and set up a Zoom call or a phone call and just say, hey, can I have 10 minutes just to cover these questions? And you'll get clarity. And if the answer you see still is confusing, then you can ask a follow-up question immediately and get an answer from these experts that are in the field. We have over 300 state representatives that are ready and wanting to help you. So please take
Yes.
advantage of them. They want to be used, and they've made a lot of mistakes just like me and Sabrena, so they know what not to do and what to do. So don't be
Right.
afraid to use them. So
Your best resource actually for
yeah,
that, for getting
exactly.
questions answered.
Yeah, yeah. So and we'll go back on this page too and try to. I know I've seen a lot of RDs and regional directors and reps on here already answering a lot of these questions, but we'll kind of filter through and see if we
Great.
see any. But thank you guys so much for being here. This will be on our YouTube page as well, our National Celebrate Recovery YouTube page. If you want to watch it there, but you can watch this on replay and go back and get nuggets if you weren't able to take notes. But thank you guys so much for being here.
Yes.
Sabrena, thank you for your wisdom and expertise
You as
being
well,
in this. It's
Rodney.
always fun doing these with you. So,
Yes.
but hopefully we'll be able to do some more of these and maybe we'll see you guys very soon doing this again. Don't forget about Summit. Still time, 2 weeks to register for the summit. I think we have over 10,000 people that are registered. How cool is that?
Yes.
So you want to be
So
a part of the
awesome.
party. So make sure you register and be a part of that. Just $49 to register for that. crsummits.com. So love you guys. Sabrena, have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks so much.
See you guys.